Well, I just can't believe in this whole Bible thing, this whole deity of Jesus Christ thing, because there's no scientific evidence. Science says no. That's ridiculous, because Christianity is all built upon a historical event. Jesus came to this earth, claimed that he was the Son of God, did miracles in his name, suffered and died. 3 days later was resurrected. You can't prove that an event happens using the scientific method, because it's got to be repeatable, observable, and measurable. You can't repeat. You can't go back and try and recreate something that already happened. You just have to use historical evidence instead of scientific evidence.
It's not making no sense. God is my weapon, the cross on my hip. I pray every day, I ain't making a wish. Count me out if you want, matter of fact, I insist. My life is so tailored, I move in a swift. Bring up my name while I ain't even net. The table is set, take care of my dogs. Just 25, but I move like a vet. Got taking the lead, this ain't a duet.
Okay. We good?
Yep.
What is the craziest thing that's happened to you guys this week? Because I have some cool moments from this week.
I think Anthony said he wants to answer this one
did
first.
I say that?
Yeah,
okay, I guess I'll start now. Well, the craziest thing that happened to me this week, I wouldn't say it's crazy, but
Well, then why are you sharing it?
it's a great question.
No, I'm kidding.
I can't do that. Probably me and all my friends, we went to a line dancing place called Renegades. It was fun. It's pretty crazy.
Dude, that's so crazy.
So crazy, dude.
How about you?
Man, that is crazy.
He stabs Brendan.
Nothing really crazy happened to me, but the most craziest thing that happened to me this whole last week. I tried dyeing my hair. I tried highlighting my hair a little bit. I have brown hair, a little bit blonder. I did it twice and then nothing happened. My hair looked the exact same.
That's crazy.
That's
crazy. I know.
So
right?
crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
I saw that on your story. I was
Wait,
gonna swipe up.
Gavin, did something crazy happen to you?
Guys, something pretty crazy happened.
Wait, dude.
So, let me share. So this actually happened last Tuesday when we filmed it was before we filmed last week, and I just forgot to share this. It slipped my mind. But I was in my intro to business class, and my teacher was talking about jobs basically, and what you should do after college. And she's basically talking about passions. And she was like, if you do something that you're passionate about, as a job, odds are you'll be more successful. And after she said this, in my head, I'm like, God, I really wish I could do something like the podcast and make a living out of it. Something along the lines of that in my head. And right after I finished that thought, the teacher says, but take that with a grain of salt.
That's crazy.
Okay, that is actually crazy.
So
That is actually crazy.
dude, after she said that, because our podcast is called Grain of Salt, for you guys if you don't know. After she said that, I was looking around the room. I was like, did you guys hear that? Because no one in that room knew. It was just me.
Wait,
it was
so
chills.
in order to make a living off the podcast, you got to run 4 2-minute ads throughout the podcast, right?
That's gonna lead us into our first sponsor of the video. No, but and then also just another moment. Last night, my friend Daniel and I were longboarding, and we were just hanging out, and I was like, dude, I really, really am so hungry. And we were talking about how hungry we were, and then we're driving by this place on our longboards, and the guy is holding bags of food, and he's like, do you guys want free food? It was all cooked, all good and everything. And he was like, yeah, they're training staff on how to cook meals, and so they just had all this food to give out. So God is good.
Man, that's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
But anyways, I'm Gavin.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Anthony.
Oh my gosh, guys.
And this is the Grain of Salt podcast, the #1 podcast that you should take with a grain of salt. Anthony, let's give a little round of applause. Woo! Yay! You can't hear it, but there's applause going on now.
Okay, I was
It's just imagine it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Who are you?
Who are you?
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be on here, guys. I'm Anthony. I'm a sophomore at Florida Atlantic University. I've known Gavin for almost a year. Met him at a Christian organization on campus called Crew. And Brandon, I've known Brandon for a while. I've known him since 7th grade. He's a good friend throughout all of middle school and high school. So, yeah.
I didn't know you guys knew each other that long.
And if you guys don't know, we are, now that we're in college together, we are much closer and podcasts are much more accessible to us. And we are having guests on for all these podcasts now. And if you guys don't know, if you want to come on the podcast, we asked Anthony, what would you like to talk about? All of our podcasts now, we ask the guest what their expertise is and what they want to talk about. So Anthony, what are we talking about today?
What we're talking about today is something I'm very passionate about. It's apologetics. And for those who don't know, the definition of apologetics is the reasonable justification for any ideology. Usually it's paired with religion, because that's the main ideologies that need reasonable justification. And a lot of people like to use the phrase defending your faith, logical arguments as to why you believe what you believe.
Interesting. So I didn't even realize apologetics wasn't just tied to religion. What else is it tied to?
I mean, it's just mainly tied to religion, but it could
politics too.
It could be anything, yeah.
Interesting.
Just a reasonable justification for why you believe that the Earth is flat, or why
defending your faith.
Why we should spend more money on this instead of that.
Yeah, like defending your faith, whatever your faith is in or your beliefs are in. Like, let me think. Like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Matt Walsh, people like that. Like they are apologists, basically. Like they go and are a voice of reason and logic of why their beliefs are correct logically. It's kind of like what they do.
So it's just like a logical art. It's a way to logically argue your beliefs. Is basically
like a lot of like Donald Trump will go and share his beliefs, but he doesn't have to go and voice why they're correct. But these guys are the ones that are like, you should believe this because of this. The idea of...
I'm pretty hyped for this episode because apologetics is something that I really don't know much about. So I'm kind of here today just to ask questions and just to learn more and to just see what you know. And maybe you can bestow some wisdom upon me today, young Padawan.
But before we get into the questions and everything about apologetics, Anthony, why are you the way you are, and why are you so passionate about apologetics?
Why am I the way that I am? I would say like a simple question or an answer for that is, obviously like go-to is because God made me this way. God is a very creative creator. He made all of us individually. I don't believe that we're some random clump of cells. I think that we are more than just our body, and God carefully knit us together in our mother's womb. And the reason why I'm so very passionate about apologetics is I've always been very logical in my thinking. Whenever people tell me something, or even if I know it's the right answer, I'll ask them why. Why do you believe that? Why do you say that? You state a claim, what evidence you have to support it? I was actually talking to a friend the other day, and well, it's actually kind of off topic, but my brother, he's having a kid.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Oh,
this
my
is
other
cool.
brother. You haven't met him.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
his brother.
Okay.
Yeah, he's like 25. He's having a kid. We're all super happy, but we've all started, like, me and my other brother and my friends, we've been having conversations like, man, like, what would you do if your kid did this, your kid did that, and your kid got in trouble? And I was talking to my one friend, and she said, I was like, I think we brought up some extreme case. Like, what would you do if your kid got in a fight, or you were selling drugs, right?
Yeah.
Something extreme. And she came with the response, my kid would never do that. Yeah. My kid would never do that. So my response was, why? Why do you believe that? Why do you think that your kid isn't even born? And she didn't have a response. And I'm sure her kid's probably not gonna be awful, go to prison, all this. But
Why though?
why? Like if someone's gonna state a claim, then you should have a reason why it's true.
Yes. Well, that kind of segues into the idea of apologetics for the Christian faith, because we'll straight out say before we get into it, the Bible and the Christian faith is not something that you can prove with empirical evidence, but it's something that you can show evidence toward it being true. It's like Anthony's not going to come and be like, oh, well, here is the blood cells of Jesus Christ, and we can date it back to this date. Like, that would be empirical evidence. But no, there's things that he's left us to lead us to the truth. You agree with that?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And another claim that I hear is, well, I just can't believe in this whole Bible thing, this whole deity of Jesus Christ thing, because there's no scientific evidence, Science says no. But that's ridiculous, because you can't use the whole Christianity is all built upon the fact, like a historical event, the fact that Jesus came to this earth, claimed that he was the Son of God, did miracles in his name, suffered and died, and then on top of that, 3 days later was resurrected, right? It's all built on that. You can't prove that an event happened using using the scientific method, because it's got to be repeatable, observable, and measurable. You can't repeat an event. Like, you can't go back and like try and recreate something that already happened, like Jesus' resurrection.
Interesting.
You just have to use historical evidence instead of scientific evidence.
Yeah,
So,
I like to point out something Cliff likes to bring up is that people will say, like, prove it, prove it, prove it. And he likes to bring up that you can't prove anything. There's nothing you can prove in life. Even if you do a science test and it repeats itself over and over again, there is no way to prove that the next time it won't come out different.
yeah, scientific tests just what they show is, if they, things tend to be this way,
Yeah.
If you
So it's like more probability based.
It's kind of the probability. Yeah, in a way, yeah.
I know.
It's
And it
more
shows
like,
it shows the nature of things,
Okay,
right?
okay.
So it shows when you have something that's a metal and you hit it with electricity, it tends to attract magnets because of electromagnetics, right?
Yeah.
Like, it tends to be this way.
So it sounds like you're saying the whole science can't prove this event because it can't be repeated. So do they rely more on the historical evidence?
Yes.
To back it up?
you want to know something I say about science? This is a big thing. Sorry, I feel like dodging Gavin's question this whole time, but
No, you're good. I'm just trying to understand.
so people say, oh, science doesn't coincide with the Bible. And I want you to, everybody listening, and both of you guys right now, just like imagine that you're in the 1500s and you are 12 years old and someone comes up to you and says, hey, here's this book and I want you to read it and then believe in everything it says with your whole heart. And there's nothing else I'm going to tell you because there's nothing I can show you because they don't have science back then. They can't prove, they don't know what the Dead Sea Scrolls are. They can't prove that these books were from back then. They have no evidence that other than the words of man and mouth that Jesus died or whatever, or that he was even a real person. So it's like, if you think logically, if my brain were in a 12-year-old in 1500s, that kid would be like, okay, you're crazy. That's like if you came up to me and gave me like a Harry Potter book and said that it was real. If that makes any sense. So I think that people saying science goes against the Bible is just crazy because without science, I think that many, many logical thinkers would not have come to Christ.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that in the day and age that we are today, we're actually able to understand, translate, and like just see the overwhelming amount of evidence and historical evidence for the Bible. Whereas like someone back in the 1500s wouldn't be able to see that. So,
Yeah. What was your question?
Oh, I was just trying to understand. It sounds like the whole argument of like science can't prove the Bible, but it's the historical context is what we lean on. But but how does that correlate with you? You guys were just agreeing that science can back it up. But is that considered scientific study, or is it just more considered like facts?
So there's no studies. So there's things like there's experiments and there's case studies. Case studies are things that you don't repeat. Like, you ever heard of that thing where that guy had the metal rod go through his brain and he lived? It went straight through his brain and they took it out and he lived. You can't repeat that. You know what I mean? You can't
Right.
just like study that specific event.
Okay.
And everything in history, you can't just repeat it. So, and whenever we say prove, yes, we tend to say that something is proven if you can repeat it and stuff like that, like do an experiment, like however many trials it was when you're in like 5th grade, like 3 or 9 or whatever it was. Like, you can't do that for history, but what you look at is one person's point of view, and then you look at 10 other people's point of views. And if they line up, the chances of that becoming true or being a true story is higher.
Okay, and so so we've laid the foundation of what apologetics is, and so to kind of go to like what you're talking about is like, what is it called? Not testimonies.
eyewitness accounts.
Eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just start firing away questions, Anthony.
Okay.
Why should we believe that Jesus existed and that he died and resurrected?
I'm going to ask you a question. Do you believe that, let's say, Socrates existed? Oh, is it too far?
That's good. That's good.
Do you believe that Socrates existed?
Yeah.
What about Caesar?
Oh,
Emperor of Rome.
here's
Yeah.
a good one. Do you believe Aristotle wrote with the things that he wrote?
That's what I'm kind of trying to segue into. All these things we all believe. I mean, everyone's like, yeah, like you can go back, you can see all there's actually no original copies of these ancient texts, but there are manuscripts which were written right afterwards. So the originals are gone. These manuscripts were written, basically copies of them, and the more copies that you have, the better, because you can cross-reference each of these copies with each other, and in order to basically make sure that they mesh well. So an example of that is like, if you have one person who says that so-and-so did something, right? That's just he said, she said. But if you have 10 different people from different points of views in different places, right, saying that this event happened, not necessarily in the exact same language or the exact same like the exact same writing, but from different points of views, you'd say, okay, like that event happened, and we can see like all these different point of views that happened.
Right.
So we go back, and the manuscripts that were written for Aristotle, for Homer's Iliad, which was a big ancient text. It was seen with as many Greeks as like their quote unquote Bible. It was actually the Homer's Iliad was originally written in 800 BC, right? The manuscripts weren't even, the copies of it weren't written until 300 AD.
So that's a 500-year gap?
So
1100.
Oh, 1100.
800 BC to 300 AD is the gap between when the original Homer's Iliad was made and when they sat down, made the copies from all the different.
And if
Interesting.
you look at Aristotle, we have the manuscripts we have of Aristotle and all of the things he believed in. The most recent ones we have are from 200 years after his time of living.
Yeah.
So it's like we choose, because of eyewitness accounts and other people, to believe that what he said were his words and not somebody else's. So a lot of the times, specifically Muslims and just atheists, they'll like to point out like the lack of eyewitness accounts, or like why is that one real? And then we're like, okay, well, why do you believe in these history books but not this one?
Yeah, 100%. And and the number of manuscripts is important because it's just it shows the historical. It's like how strong the historical evidence is. If there's only like one or two manuscripts, it's not very strong. The second ancient text with the most historical manuscripts is Homer's Iliad, has about 1,600 in them.
And we
Gavin,
trust and believe
1,600.
that.
1,600 is an insane amount.
That
That's
is a lot.
Gavin, I want you to guess how many manuscripts.
Okay. What do you think the number one ancient text is?
I'm gonna guess.
Yeah, guess.
The Quran. No, the Bible. I'm
Bible.
kidding.
The New Testament. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, how many of the Bible, Old and New, we'll count both. How many manuscripts do you think that we have that we can credibly account?
Isn't there?
These are different points of views that can cross-reference.
Number two is 1,600. What's number one?
Isn't it like 3,500?
It's 5,500.
Whoa.
It's almost 6,000.
Yeah.
So what are these? Are the cross references you're referring to just like scriptures written, or
So
is it more eyewitness testimonies?
Whenever the original Bible was composed, these are the copies that were made directly after, right? So basically, and also the longer period of time it is between the original and the copies is the worst, because they could have been lost in translation or lost across.
And wait, I do have a question, because so between all that time and now, Brandon was telling me about the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were found recently.
I can get into those real quick if you like. Let me explain.
I was about to finish the thought. So Homer's Iliad was written, and it was written in 800 BC is what it said. The copies that we have now of it, the 1,600, were written in 300 AD. That's a 1,100 year gap. What do you think the gap is from when the Bible was finished, the original, and when the copy manuscripts that we have now are dated? So 1,100 years is the difference between the original and the copies for the Iliad. What do you think it is for the New Testament?
I'm not sure.
About 30 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Right,
Same generation.
So there's people who were alive when Jesus was alive, that were alive when the manuscripts came out,
Okay.
which is very, very important. And
That's incredibly rare for an ancient text.
Interesting.
Now, you were asking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I am a big nerd for the Dead Sea Scrolls. So wait, let me just spit some facts out real quick for why the Bible is vary, before I get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, about why it's trustworthy. Okay, so 5,500 plus, you said close to 6,000 manuscripts. It has 40 plus authors that are verified, depending on what you believe. It was written throughout 3 different continents and in 3 different languages. And I want you to just like imagine another one. I want you guys to just imagine. I tell you guys, Anthony and Gavin, I send you into one room and I say, all right, write a story about a superhero that saves the world. And then you go in there, you write a story, and you write half the story. I tell you to write half the story. And then I say, okay, Anthony, go and finish the story. But you don't get to know what he wrote about the first time. But you have to make it make sense, right? You're going to fail 100 times out of 100 because you have no idea what he wrote about. So it's like, how do these people who were across like centuries of time
In different continents,
thousands of years probably, and against different continents in different languages, create a story that had cross-references to books that some of them didn't even have access to at the time? It's like, to see that evidence, not proof that it's true, it's just evidence that it's like, you see that and you're like, oh, well, if any other book of history had those things that applied to it, you'd be like, oh yeah, I definitely believe it, it's true. But people are just naive to the fact that that's true about the Bible, and they choose not to believe the Bible. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all right, they are not the same thing as manuscripts. They're a little bit different because manuscripts would be like the rewriting of something. The Dead Sea Scrolls were like scriptures, ancient scriptures, like literature about religion, and they were found early 1900s, like 1930s and 1950s. They were found in like I have it right here, the northwestern shores of the Dead Sea. They were found in 12 different caves. They were all they're called the Dead Sea Scrolls. And if you inside of one of the caves, just one of the caves, you find 7 scrolls: the Great Isaiah Scroll, the second copy of Isaiah, the Community Rule Scroll, a couple other ones. I'm just going to talk about a few though. The War Scroll, Genesis Scroll, Thanksgiving Hymns. But the one that's really important that I think apologetics can revolve around the verse Isaiah 7:14. And Isaiah 7:14, let me find it real quick. Isaiah 7:14, right here. It says, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will call him Emmanuel. Now, the reason why this is important is because people like to claim that you can't find Jesus in the Old Testament. And this is the Old Testament. If I were to read you that verse, what would you assume they're talking about?
Jesus.
Now, a lot of people like to think that, oh, that's not what they're talking about. I've been told, I was debating somebody who was an atheist. He told me that was not about Jesus. And then you look further in the Bible. Matthew 21:22 to 23 says, all this took place. Oh, so backstory. Matthew, the first chapter of Matthew is going down the genealogy of Jesus. And it says, all of this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet Isaiah. To the prophet. So the virgin will conceive. He like recites it. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us.
So they do confirm that was him in the Old Testament.
So they confirm in the New Testament that in the Old Testament they were speaking about Jesus and not somebody else.
Interesting.
But the whole point about the Dead Scrolls, there's just a lot about the Dead Sea Scrolls. We think the manuscript's 30 years after, but the Dead Sea Scrolls, fun fact, the reason why 7:14 is so important is that there's this thing called the Great Isaiah Scroll. So in the Dead Sea Scrolls as a whole, 25% of all biblical text comes out of the Great Isaiah Scroll. Okay, that's a lot, saying that there was 12 caves, and this is just one scroll from one cave. The Great Isaiah Scroll has almost every single part, over 99% of Isaiah, all 66 chapters of Isaiah, is found inside the Isaiah Scrolls.
And do they line up
And they line up perfectly to the original Hebrew of the original Isaiah.
Wow.
Now, it's not like perfect translation because each version, like the NIV versus the CSB, like they have different wordings, but it all says the same stuff. Like they could all be translated to say the same thing. And I want you to guess, he said 30 years after Jesus' death. When do you think the creation of the Dead Sea Scrolls, like when did they occur?
I'm going to say probably like, if it was Isaiah, probably before or no?
Yeah, so the creation of the scroll happened over a period of time, 300 years before Jesus is coming and dying, and 100 years after. Yeah. So it's like these scrolls have been around and were written these that Isaiah verse was written before the whole Bible was even created.
Yeah.
So you can say that the people who were writing them weren't even Christians yet, because before Jesus they weren't considered that. And that just goes to show that Isaiah 7:14 is legitimate, and that there is Jesus in the back, and they said that he's conceived from a virgin, and that they basically just proclaim that this man is God.
Yeah.
And that just crazes me. That's insane.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And also, something that is crazy is Jesus came and he fulfilled specific prophecies,
Right.
like prophecies in Isaiah, and there's one in Psalm 22. So, when Jesus was on the cross, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Right? And whenever we hear that, we think of Jesus, right? But that was actually from a verse, the beginning of Psalms 22, and it goes out, and the way I've heard it is, if I were to sing the start of a song, right, and it's a very popular song, we all know it, any song, right, people were looking at that song, or start singing the next lyrics, right? So he started off singing this song, my God, why have you abandoned me? So we can look into it and just look into this psalm. Why are you so far from my deliverance and my words of groaning? My God, I cry by day, but you do not answer. By night I have no rest. But you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Our ancestors trusted in you. They trusted and you rescued them. They cried to you and were set free. They trusted in you and were not disgraced. And it keeps going on. Many bulls surround me. Strong ones of Bashan encircle me. They open their mouths against me. Talking about the Israelites hating Jesus, spitting on him, the Roman soldiers all hurting him, lions mauling and roaring. I am poured out like water, and my bones are disjointed. My heart is like wax melting within me. Right? It also says he's poured out like water.
And when
Jesus was stabbed, I forgot the medical condition, but it's a very, very medical condition. Whenever after you die, water spills down.
Asphyxiation or something?
Yeah, something like that. But it's crazy. For dogs have surrounded me, a gang of evildoers has enclosed in me. So Jesus is referencing, while he's on the cross, the prophecy of his death.
Yeah.
in Psalms 22. Wow.
He says the beginning of it. And us, we think, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's something Jesus said. But the Jewish people who were well knowledge in the Old Testament would have known that song.
So they would have lost their mind. They would have been like, "Oh my gosh, this is Jesus!" This is a
That's
prophecy
crazy
fulfilled.
that you say that, because there's a lot of Jews out there that don't even recognize that verse.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I think apologetics. Actually, before we get into the next subject, we're talking about Jesus. I was talking about Jesus in the Old Testament. I'm just going to read a couple verses. Actually, just have one verse right here. And I think it's very good. This is Proverbs 30:40 NIV. Who has gone up to heaven and come down? Whose hands have gathered up the wind? Who has wrapped up the waters in a cloak? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name and what is his son's? Surely you know. So right there in the Old Testament, they're referencing God doing all of these things, and they say that he has a son. I'll say Muslims like to say that there's nowhere in the Bible that says that there's a son of God. And I mean, that's right there. What do you think that means? What was the name of his son? Right? I mean, it's pretty blatantly clear.
Right.
All right. Well, I'm sorry. We can continue.
So, to just continue, I guess we've kind of talked about why the Bible can be credible, why we should believe the Bible. We've talked about how we should believe Jesus. Something that I know that a lot of people probably have questions on is, let me think of how to word this really quick. Why should we believe the religion of Christianity apart from all the other religions? And to my understanding, I believe that a lot of religions have a bunch of similarities with Christianity.
Yeah. So a lot of people think that other religions, a lot of people think the Bible is just, and it is like a pamphlet to look at to be like, okay, how should I live my life? Let me go through all these books and say
Proverbs, Psalms.
Yeah, Proverbs, Psalms. How should I live my life? How should I go about things? Right. But what it also does is it's a text that reports supernatural events, right? So it doesn't just do that, but it also makes a crazy claim that, that Jesus did all these miracles. Jesus died on the cross. Jesus rose on the third day. And it makes these claims. And the reason why to believe the Bible is because what happened after. So all the Christians who, over 500, saw Jesus for the days. There was 60 days after he was crucified. He was alive.
I think, it was, I don't know the day, but it was like over a period of time after he died, he revealed himself to 500 people.
Yeah. So over that period of time, there's 500 people. And I don't know if you know this, but in Rome, like ancient Rome, it was not a popular thing to be a Christian. It was not a popular thing to be in any religion, to say anyone else but, the Roman emperor was king.
Yeah.
So these Christians were literally martyred and publicly executed, publicly stood trial, publicly executed, and said, like, oh, if you don't denounce Christianity, we will torture you and kill you. And they willingly did, right? I don't know about you, but like people wouldn't do that for a lie. People would only do that for truth. Let's say they did want to like do something crazy, like overthrow the Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
And all 500 of them got together and said, let's just say this whole religion thing happened, this whole Christianity thing happened. There's no way that all 500 people would, like, over a joke or over a lie, would all be tortured, all be martyred, all die, and none of them would denounce Christianity. The only reason that they would do that, stand strong and not denounce Christianity, is if they saw with their own eyes someone conquer death, someone who offers life eternal.
Yeah. Where are the eyewitness accounts from, like, all the 500 people? Like, how do we know?
I can kind of explain that one. So we don't have the number 500. We don't have evidence. Like, I can't prove anything, but there's not evidence for all of their, like, testimonies. There's not evidence for all of them, but there's evidence that there were people, like dozens and dozens of people, that were claiming to have known Jesus. And like the number 500 is not something that you can prove or have evidence of, but there is evidence there was this guy, Tactius, I forget how you pronounce his name, but he speaks on Jesus dying and how afterwards his people were dying for him, basically. And this is part of the reason why why it's kind of a historical fact now that Jesus died on the cross. And when it comes to Islam, one of their biggest things of why they alter from Christianity is that they don't believe Jesus died. They believe that he was taken from an angel, he rose into heaven, right? So there's so much historical facts that almost all atheists believe Jesus died.
And that's the other thing. A lot of scholars and religions believe Jesus existed, right? To my understanding. So that should even more so prove the existence that Jesus lived. It's just more so the argument of, did he die or was he resurrected?
Yeah, and here's some evidence that some things that happened after Jesus. This is outside of the Bible. You guys have heard of the Book of Enoch?
Yeah.
Some people are like, oh, you can't use that book because it's a religious book. But I'm like, it's not a book that we believe in, right? It's not a book that we follow religiously, as in like we put our morals after this book.
It's not canon.
It's yeah.
Yeah, it's not like
it's
God
not
inspired.
in the Bible.
I'm just
and it's not God breathed. And also there's this book called The Acts of Peter. I don't know if you've heard about that. But basically, there are these two books. The idea of Peter being crucified upside down is not a biblical idea. People believe that because of other books that are outside of the Bible.
Really, that's great. I've heard that, and I feel like it's one of those things where like I heard it, but I never did the due diligence of looking into it myself. So that's why I was like, I would have stand firm, like, yeah, Peter died in the Bible, even though it didn't.
Yeah, it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible he got crucified upside down. But there's eye testimonies from other books that have not as good of credibility as the Bible, but decent credibility, that you don't just take these books and take it word for word, like, oh, everything's true. But you don't do that for any book ever, do you? Right? You don't do that for this podcast, do you? It's why it's called Grain of Salt. Like you take it with a grain of salt. But the fact that those books exist should prove to us that not that he was crucified upside down, but that he was killed. At least that he was killed.
All right.
And have you ever heard of these things where it's like some people are like, oh, well, there's all these events. All the people's like they get numbers mixed up. They're like, they look at the newspaper of the Titanic, right? They're like, oh, Jesus didn't actually die. They look at the newspapers back in the day of the Titanic, and all of the different newspapers have different numbers for the amount of deaths of what happened with that Titanic.
Interesting.
And then somebody, one of this biblical scholar brings up, okay, well, what happened in all of them? And he said the Titanic sank.
Oh,
Jesus died.
That's a good
Yeah.
point.
Nobody's going to forget that one. They're all gonna
Interesting.
be like, we all know Jesus died. They all said the same thing. They all said that Jesus died.
That's also a good point when doing textual criticism. Like if a journalist is going between people and getting people's eyewitness accounts and writing down their stories about an event, let's say they're eyewitnesses, right? If everything matched up perfectly and they said the exact same story and all the same details, then something would have been up, because they would have all had their met together and been like, okay, we're going to say this and say that, right? But the fact of the matter is that people are going to have different things. People are going to forget some details and people are going to focus on other things. But as long as the main story stays the same, if all the minute details are small, can differ by a little bit, but as long as the main story is the same, that's how you know that that's true. That's what
Interesting.
happened.
Yeah. So it's like the little details aren't what we should be nitpicking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like if we if we were going somewhere, we're like, oh, there was there were these 5 guys there, and someone else said, oh, there were like 5 guys and 3 girls. The one guy could have just not even seen the girls, not paid attention to girls, or when recalling the story, only thought of the 5 guys. But you got to look at the commonalities between the stories.
And also a good way to actually relate this to real life is like think about like a crime. With eyewitness reports, they're all going to have different things that they notice and see, but there's still a common denominator of a crime that occurred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're all just going to remember different details.
In every testimony, Jesus died. Right? Jesus died, and then all of the people who spoke said that he came back to life and claimed to be king. Tell people what I've told you, what you've seen. Do you kind of want to get into the whole idea of
God?
like people prosecuting, Islam and Judaism, the idea of altering beliefs and why Christianity is right, even though Islam says this, or why Judaism believes in this?
Do you want to touch on that after? I was going to ask about the existence of God.
Yeah, sure. We'll do it after.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about Jesus. We've talked about the Bible. But a big question around the whole apologetics debate is, why should I believe that there is a God?
Dude, I feel like that is like humanity's question. Like humanity is always longing for, like, there's got to be something. And you see that, like, as people get near death, like maybe they've been atheists their whole life and they're going towards death and they're like super sad. I have no clue. Like if they're an atheist, they have no clue what's going on. They're so worried, right? Like there's got to be something more than this. And the reason, something I believe is like the idea that creation is a proof of a creator. That's a big one, right? This room that we're sitting in, right? I have no clue. I have no clue who the architecture is, who the engineer is, who the electrician is, who put up all these things. But I knew that there had to be somebody had to put this up here, right? And I could go out and do my due diligence and find out who did it, right? So I think that's why it's important to look into God and like if there's a God and who this God is. I think it's our due diligence as humanity to see, like, look at this creation, look at us, look at how we're made and how we're each like individual human beings. There's got to be someone who created this.
Yeah.
We got to find out.
And like the idea of unique design and the idea of order, like the fact that there's order in the world.
Yeah.
Like why is it that if Christianity is true, like it's just by chance that humans decided that murder was wrong, just by chance? Because if they're not Christian and there's no like morals that were implemented us by somebody that's greater than us, then why are we not like all the other animals? Why do we not why do we stay away from homosexuality? Why do we like to be in a relationship instead of being with like all the other animals that ravaged whatever? Like they're totally okay with murder and adultery and stuff like that. It's like why are we unique? And I think that proves, or it's evidence, you would say, toward a creator.
Yeah, 100%. Also, another argument is the fact that the idea of like that nothing created some. So if you think about the beginning of everything, the beginning of time, the universe, there had to have been something. There couldn't have ever one point been nothing, right? So the first law of thermodynamics, I think, is that matter is neither created nor destroyed. It's just transfer. It's a transfer of energy. It's a transfer of matter. We're changing things. When we build this building, we take matter from the earth and put it here to make a building. And energy is neither lost. Energy is neither created or destroyed. It's just transferred. There's potential energy in like a block of coal, and when we burn it, then that energy gets transferred into heat.
Yeah.
So this idea we only see in science of energy and matter being transferred. We never see it being created, just out of thin air, out of nothing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of spontaneous generation, like scientists went crazy over it, trying to figure out how the universe came here, and they came up short every time.
Yeah, 100%.
They could never figure out how to create something from nothing.
Yeah, and the logic is like, so we see in every day in all our life this order, these laws of thermodynamics, laws of gravity that we can observe, but we're just going to chalk it up. Scientists just chalk it up to, at some point it just randomly combined, all this energy just popped up out of nowhere. It's kind of like a lazy approach.
Yeah. So, kind of to talk about the moral argument. If we know right from wrong. Why, if God exists, then why would there be evil in the world in the first place?
I think that has to do with, have you ever heard of the fact that dark isn't like an object? Like dark isn't a thing.
It's the absence.
Yes. Dark is the absence of light. So I'm not going to say that God didn't create sin. God didn't do that. That's just the absence of God's love, of God's presence. God can't be in the same presence as sin. So when God's presence and God's love isn't there, then that's where sin is. And that's the world that we're kind of in, We allowed sin to enter the world, the initial sin, Satan tempting, eating of the forbidden fruit, right? That's what allowed evil to enter into the world,
And so back up, our following up question, why does God allow bad things to happen? If he's truly a benevolent God, as a lot of atheists argue, why would God allow bad things to happen?
Well, I think bad is relative. So if we think about it, I think that, God has a plan and we're all going through God's plan. We can look at it from our point of view and say, like, for example, right? It could be a bad thing that I went to the casino and lost all my money at the casino. That's a bad thing for me.
Yeah.
The owner of that casino, that's a good thing. He likes it. That's a good thing for him. So it can be relative of it, like the idea that like of good and evil, right? It can be whichever shoe you're in, like whoever shoes you're in. I think that it comes down to the idea of like our choices and the things that we make. Like I heard something that's like whether you want a relationship with God or not, whether you want to be with him or be separated with him completely, like that you will get that, in the end. It might not be a desirable outcome, but you'll get it.
So why did God let Job suffer?
I actually would like to say, this is Hebrews 12. It says, "My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and chastises every son whom he receives." So, like, I totally agree with what you said as bad is relative. If my father is going to discipline me, it is probably because he needs to teach me something. And I will see that as bad, but my father sees that as good. He sees discipline as a good thing. And in God's eyes, it's the same thing. And like you said, he has a plan for us. And so if something happens in our lives that genuinely is terrible in our eyes, maybe it's not that way to God. And that's kind of like my whole view on it. Like discipline is important, but I guess there is still arguments against like things that aren't disciplined, like the Holocaust or like rape or human trafficking. And like, what do you think about all that?
Well, okay, obviously I'd say that's bad. You know, I don't think that's very, like, I don't think there's any view where you can say, oh, it might, you know, for these kind of people, these people it might be good. Like, those are things that are like blanket statement. Now looking back on humanity, we can all see it. It's funny. It's kind of off topic. I saw this TikTok and it said like, it's funny how the good guys won every single war. And he was standing in a World War II museum. And it's like, that's kind of a crazy claim to say in a World War II. Like, I think that time the good guys won it.
Yeah.
Wait, what was I saying? What was the question?
Why does like things that are just genuinely bad, like trafficking and murder, why does that stuff?
And I would characterize it as evil. Like, why does God allow not bad but evil to happen?
I think it's because I think that it comes with sin. It comes with the idea that we can be held accountable for our own choices. You know, I want to do this, right? Like we tell God that we want to do this, and God is like gives it to us. You know, like if you want to eat of the fruit, like Adam and Eve did, you can. Like, but He warns us and He wants a relationship with us. But whenever we turn away and we allow sin into the world, and that's sin is, and the enemy is here to steal, kill, and destroy. So, like, even though we know the consequences of it, we still cause sin, you know? And it might not be a direct correlation, you know? It might not be we did something bad so it's happening to us, but it's just the environment that we're in that, you know, this world is broken. This is not, also, it's the idea that this is not our home, you know? This is not, like, He's put eternity on our hearts. This is not, like, we are, like, here for a purpose, right? To glorify God, right? But this isn't the end all be all.
Yeah, like the end goal is not to live a nice life on earth.
Yeah.
And also, like, that's basically it.
Can we talk? All right, so something I'm very passionate about. I am also very passionate about apologetics and specifically defending my faith against Muslims. And
the way you said Muslims is crazy.
Just
defending my
specifically
faith against Muslims.
If you're Islam, if you're Jewish, if you're what is that weird religion with the
Scientology?
Buddhist or
if you're
Hinduism.
Scientologist?
oh, dude, that's Tom
Buddhism.
Cruise.
But basically, there's many things. There's many things that they'll say about Christianity, like you can't see Jesus in the Old Testament. Boom, just showed you that earlier. There's a lot of things that the Quran, you can see that the Quran was written based off the Bible, and it's not even hard. Okay, the Quran was made 600 AD, about 600 years. That's just rough estimate. It's around 600 years after Jesus died. And even in the Bible itself, it warns us that there's going to be things like Islam to come by. It says, so if you guys don't know a little bit backstory about Islam, the words were, Muhammad was supposedly illiterate, so he could not read and write. And the words were given to him from the angel Gabriel. So the words to write in the Bible were given to him from the angel Gabriel. In Galatians 1:8, this is a Bible verse, Galatians 1:8 says, but even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you the gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. So right there, it just said that even if an angel tells you, after now, like, don't listen to it. If it's contrary to what the Bible says, do not listen to it. And fun fact, so there's all of these religions, like you like to use logic. Like I came to this religion logically, just like Anthony said he did. And if you look at it logically, Muslims like to say like, oh, you believe in a God that's 3 in 1. Explain that. Like, you can't explain what somebody who's 3 in 1 is because human beings can't be 3 in 1. They're like, how did Jesus pray to his Father if he is God? How does that work? Like, he's 3 in 1. That doesn't make any sense. And I like to argue the fact that they say it's the idea of having faith in a being that can't be explained. Muslims like to argue that it's ignorant that we believe in a God who's 3 in 1. And then I like to say, okay, well, you believe in a God that's outside of time, space, and matter. Okay, so when you can explain to me what that looks like, because I believe in that same thing too. I believe God's outside of space, time, matter. I believe in that too because I have faith in a divine being. They like to think, oh, because mine's more logical because it's not 3 in 1, mine's just one person. That's more logical than saying, oh, my God's outside of time, space, and matter. No, in the human realm, those things are not we can't understand and comprehend those things. So when they use the argument of it's not logical and it can't happen, that's a very weak argument. And Muslims like to use it a lot. I'm sure you've probably heard that before.
Yeah, and just something that I sort of hold on to is that the idea, like, you can't understand the nature of God is so crazy for us to understand. You know, the idea that, you know, he's in all times at once. He's not subject to time passing the way we are.
Yeah.
You know, he's not, he can, it's kind of crazy. He can, like, it's not like he's jumping between times. He's present in all times, you know? And he didn't start. He didn't have a beginning. He just is. He was. He even told Moses, I am.
And the only way you describe this is by saying that it's divine. Yeah. Something that we can't comprehend. They're divine.
Right.
And even if you look inside of other religions, like there was this guy I saw talking about how he logically came to the belief. He was an atheist that was a very logical thinker. He came to the belief of Jesus, not through scriptures or through faith, but through logic. Purely logic, he said. Because he didn't want to read he didn't want to read anything and put his faith into anything. Like, you know how they say take a leap of faith? He didn't do that. All he did was look at all the religion, most religion. It's not about like the thousands of religions that have 10 followers. He looked at the majority of people on the world, what they believed in, and who they pointed to. If you look at, obviously, Christianity, we all believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and we listen to the New Testament and the words that he spoke to us, and we try to live our lives by that. You look at Islam. They hold people like Muhammad and Jesus to the highest standard possible. Some of them even I would go as far as saying they treat Jesus with more respect than Muhammad, because they actually try to be like Jesus. Like, you know how it says, what would Jesus do? Like, be like Jesus. Sanctification is the idea of being more like Jesus. The reason why Muslims don't shave their beard is because Jesus had a beard. That's actually true.
Interesting.
And
I know that.
And the reason why Muslims pray on their knees and their face on the ground is because that's how the prophets prayed. That's how Jesus prayed. So they're trying to become more like Jesus specifically. They literally want to be like Jesus. And they don't look like Muhammad. They look like Jesus. They try to be like Jesus because they respect Jesus so much. Look at Buddhism, right? They think Buddha was like the highest level, like the God level. He was the highest level of reincarnation that you could be. They say if you do good things in this life, you'll come back at a higher level. They think that Jesus was just like Buddha in the same level, that they believe Jesus was the highest level of reincarnation that you can be, the level of God, basically. So they respect him that much, and Islam respects him that much. He looks at that, and obviously Judaism, they respect Jesus and who he was. They don't believe he was the Son of God, but he looked at that and, what he's saying must be important, so let me go listen to what he has to say. Where are those words at? The New Testament. But another thing Muslims do is they, I don't know if you guys know this, but they pray in a specific direction. This direction is called Qibla. And if you look, you know what the Mecca is?
Yeah, they pray facing Mecca, right? Wherever they are on earth.
What's Mecca?
That's
the big cube,
big cube.
Okay.
So they literally pray toward that thing.
Interesting.
Because Muhammad, it's like there's sacred rocks inside there. I actually had nothing to do with it. But
we can I touch on the thing you said? You said the fact that they think that Jesus was such a great prophet, just a great guy overall, that they wanted to be like him.
Yep.
But I feel like, have you ever you ever heard C.S. Lewis's talk about like liar, lunatic, or Lord?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So
You've never heard about
if Jesus was a liar, a lunatic, or if he really was Lord.
Yeah. So basically, I'm surprised I heard. So basically, if there are only two options or four, I guess. But Jesus is either the Son of God. He is either a deity. He's either God incarnate, or he's a liar, lunatic, or he's a liar or a lunatic, right? The fact that he multiple times throughout Scripture claimed, like from the beginning, to be the Son of God, like that. And when they asked him, like, "Oh, good teacher, what must I do to inherit the kingdom of God?" He said, "Believe in me, like for your salvation." Right? The fact that he believes this, if he genuinely believed that and he wasn't, he's a lunatic. Like, he's a lunatic and he like needed to be like an insane asylum. Like, I'm sure there's a bunch of crazy people who have like schizophrenia who believe that they're the Messiah.
Yeah.
Right? Or he could be just an insane liar, like just
like a cultist.
Yeah, a literal cultist trying to get as many people to believe this thing and just get as many followers, right? And you wouldn't want to believe someone like that either. So you logically can't believe that Jesus was a a good guy, and you can't believe in the deity of him. You either believe that he was the Son of God and that he had the power to save our sins, or you believe that he wasn't a good guy. He was a liar. You know?
So you're either trying to be like the Son of God, or you're trying to be like a liar or a lunatic.
Yeah, exactly.
You brought up a verse, Luke 12:12 is the verse you were talking about. And a lot of Muslims actually use that to disprove the Bible and that Jesus is not Son of God. Luke 12:12 says, a king comes up to Jesus and says, "Oh, good teacher, how can I inherit the kingdom of heaven?" And he says, "Why do you call me good? For only God is good."
Yeah.
Right? And you hear that and you think, oh, that's Jesus saying that he's not God. Because that's what it sounds like, right? It's
No,
like, Now, let me explain. Yeah. He's basically like, it's like saying, basically this king didn't believe that he was God, but they believed he was a good teacher. And then he's like, okay, well, you believe I'm good, and I'm trying to explain to you that only God is good. I'm trying to show you, bro, that I'm actually God. And then later in that same passage, he says, you only inherit everywhere. Oh my gosh, what is this saying? Nobody goes to the Father except through me.
Yeah.
Like that's in the same passage. So I'm like, he goes on to explain to this king that obviously I am God because I am good. And they like to use that to disprove the Bible. And I'm just here to say that's not true.
Yeah.
Talking about, I have one more verse to bring up in the Quran. So the respectiveness that Muslims have toward Christianity, and maybe not the Muslims, but the book of the Quran. Surah 262, this is in the Quran. It says, sure, I want you guys, I'm going to read it to you, and everybody listening, interpret it by your own brain and try not to be biased, and tell me what you think it means. Surah 262, surely those who believe, and those who are Jews, and the Christians, and the Sabians, whoever believes in Allah in the last day and does good, they shall have their reward from the Lord, and there is no fear for them, nor they shall grieve.
I mean, I would take that as no matter what you believe in the last days, if you believe in Allah, then you will receive favor upon the Lord.
Well, I mean, Allah is just like, isn't that the
Abrahamic God?
Yeah,
Abrahamic God.
it's just God in a different. What language is that? Islam?
Arabic.
Arabic. Okay, yeah, my bad. So it's just God in Arabic. So it seems like a very blanket statement.
Well, no, I don't think it's a funny translation, but it literally says, surely those who believe and those who are Jews and Christians. So they're saying that if you are these things, you should not fear because you will inherit the rewards. That sounds like that you go to heaven if you're a Jew and a Christian. That's a contradiction in the Quran. Okay, you know why? Because it says the only thing that you can go to hell for, it's kind of like blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is the only unforgivable sin in the Bible.
Yeah.
They say that the one thing that you cannot be forgiven for in Islam is worshiping a different God. And they don't believe Jesus is God, and I worship Jesus. So how can a Christian go to heaven? Right? That doesn't make sense.
Interesting. So, kind of like a final question that I have for you guys, because I would obviously characterize you guys as both logical people. Like, obviously, I've talked to a lot of Christians who necessarily don't need the level of logic that you guys needed to initially believe in Jesus in the Bible. And so, as logical people, what is the importance of having faith in our religion? Because I feel like when you look, if you're like such a logical thinker, there's a certain point where you can look at all the facts, and like Brandon said, not everything can be 100% guaranteed. So there's a degree of needing to have some sort of faith. And so what does that look like for you guys? And what would you say to people out there who might be like that? Like they want to believe the Bible and they have all this evidence, but it takes not having 100% full knowledge and being able to just put some sort of faith into it.
Do you want to go first? I go
Yeah,
first.
I'll go first.
You got it.
I'd say, like, after looking at all the historical evidence and after logically looking at it, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence for the fact that, Jesus of Nazareth died and was 3 days later resurrected. And he did it. He called it too. Like, he called back. He called it. and he literally said he was the Son of God, Son of Man. He died for our sins and then resurrected. So the faith that you have to have is that can get you to heaven. That is what makes you righteous before God's eyes. Not the fact that you donate so much money or you give to charity or you volunteer, you're a quote unquote good person. the faith that you have to have is that what he did on the cross that's my salvation. That is my saving grace.
That is
I feel like that's enough. I feel like that for me, that's the faith, you know? Logically looking at it, I can be like, yeah, like there's a ton of evidence that he did this, but the faith part is that's enough. That's the faith.
Yeah, for me, I would say my personal testimony, I'd say I found Jesus, I experienced Jesus at like 16, probably, maybe 17, around that area. There was never a switch. A lot of people's testimonies, there's like a switch flipped in them, like, this is where I found Jesus. I don't think that's how it was for me. Since I was a logical thinker, it's like through evidence of the Bible, I decided to believe in the words of the Bible. And then through reading the Bible, because I believe in the words of the Bible now, through logic, then I started to see Jesus in my life. So it's like, because of the logic factor, it's like I had belief in the Bible, I didn't have faith in Jesus. But through logic and through my belief in the words of the Bible, I then took a leap of faith. And then that's when I saw the fruits of the Spirit be evident in my life, in Jesus coming to my life.
And I want to comment on that. I think a lot of people will look at the whole scientific debate of Christianity, and that's 10 million% a tactic that Satan uses to keep the scales over their eyes. Because when you fully put that faith in Jesus, that's when, like you said, the scales come off of your eyes, and it's like you can see things you've never seen before. And that's the way that Jesus will speak, the way that Jesus moves and everything. And so, like, to any viewers who like might be out there struggling with like, I want to believe this, I would argue that like Jesus didn't have to give us any sort of evidence that he existed, but yet he did. And there's so much out there. And as our science continues to grow, we continue to even see more proof of his existence even today. And so because of that, it just even points more to his good nature, and like, just put your faith in him, you know? See what he will reveal to you when you fully believe in him and trust in him, because it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that I had a kid, I was a senior in high school, and I was on this like retreat kind of, and there was like this sophomore and a freshman. I explained to them, I had just recently found Jesus, and I explained how I found Jesus. And he comes up to me after, and I basically explained to him how, oh my goodness, what was I saying? What were you saying?
Put your trust in Jesus and see what he will reveal to you. Like
yes,
the scales.
yes. I said that the whole faith part, it's like, I just forget what I was going to say. It's like I explained to him that how I came to Jesus logically, and obviously he was a logical thinker too. He comes up to me and is asking about like facts and reasons why I believe in him. And he's like, I think it makes sense to me. He's like, I think that the words of the Bible are probably true. They're most likely true. It's just I haven't seen his work in my life. And I said, that's because you haven't given a leap of faith, right? There's some people and some things out there. It's like, you have to try. You have to give a leap of faith. It's like people will come up to me and say, that are not Christian, and be like I'll explain to them how me, Anthony, and Gavin, we're all pursuing the truth, okay? So if you're talking to a Muslim, I'm gonna ask him to pray that God, Allah, God, reveals the truth to us. Because if God reveals to me that the Quran is true, then I'm gonna believe in the Quran, because I believe in God, in Jesus, right? And if that Bible is not true, then it's not true. But he's revealed to me that the Bible is true, if that makes any sense. And since he hadn't revealed to this kid yet that the Bible was the words of God, he just had to trust based off of evidence. It's a little harder to have faith in him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
And like,
It also depends on like what lens you look at through life. So before, like, I would read the Bible before I was into this whole Christianity thing. I would go to church, but just not read the Bible. The way I would look at things, like hard times or even things that are good, like I'd say like, oh, that's good, like sick, you know. I would never like thank God for it. I never would think it came from God. But if you look at it from like the Christian mindset and from that lens, then you'll start noticing it. You'll notice that it came from God. You'll notice that, but you won't be able to see that if you're not looking at it through that lens.
dude, even like the story I shared at the beginning, like with the food I got, like that was God being good to me. He was blessing me with food. And if I was not a Christian, I would just look at that as, okay, this guy just gave me free food. Like I'm eating good tonight, you know? So I love how you put that, because I agree with that 10 million %.
All right. We're going to wrap this up soon.
Yeah.
All right. This is probably the last thing I want to say. We talked about Islam. I just wanted to say an illogical mindset that Jews, specifically Jews in Judaism, have toward the Old Testament and toward the afterlife. I've talked to many Jews. Spoiler alert. Next week.
Next episode, we're going to have a someone who is actually part of the Jewish faith, and we're going to not debate, but we're just going to have an open conversation about the difference between our religions.
So tune in next week.
Yeah.
But basically, I've talked to plenty of Jews, and they believe what I've interpreted is that they don't have hope. They don't have a sense of hope, and hope is a very driving factor to how we live our lives. If you have no hope, you don't have the drive to live a good life and do good things. You know what I mean? There's no hope. And they believe that they live good lives they believe to praise God, to reap rewards on earth when they're alive, not from when they die. They believe that us Christians and Jews go to the same place. Okay? So it's like, it doesn't matter what they do on earth. Basically, they're all going to go to the same place.
Yeah. So like their motivating factor is like
Selfish thing.
is building up treasures on this earth, you know, just making the life better.
And I just think that that's illogical when it comes to believing in a God and in the afterlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like compared to eternity, what is this? You know,
Right?
Like
we can't comprehend. It's so tiny.
it gets actually crazy. Like I look forward to the day, like eternity, and like looking back on this, like
Bro, I'd just be sitting next to
When we're like 7,000 years
and
old.
it's like, all right, it's gonna be this long. Wait, no, it's gonna be this long. And it's like it just keeps going.
you can't even comprehend.
Looking back at it, we're like 20 million years old.
I remember back in my day when I was doing podcasts on Earth with Brandon and Anthony.
Wait. So why do you have a British accent now that you're a million years old?
You ever see the guys? They're like me trying to explain a Roman soldier that got his head chopped off what V-bucks are.
Bro, do you think we're gonna be up in heaven like, yo, what the Sigma? And then
Dude.
Moses is gonna be like, what did you just say?
He's gonna have some slang too, or he's gonna be like, "How hath thou drowneth thy brother?"
I wonder.
I have a theory that it comes full circle. I think that the brain rot that we're experiencing today has been experienced throughout history, maybe like a couple hundred years ago, and then it did become popular, and it's just now becoming popular. Like Sigma was a thing.
It had to have been, right?
It had to.
Yeah.
I pray not.
No, hopefully not.
Yeah, dude, Anthony, thank you so much for hopping on this
Yes,
episode
thank
today.
you.
Amazing, fruitful conversation. I feel like I learned so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Great time.
But yeah, anything else you want to add, Brandon?
Dude, nothing from me. But yeah, guys, that was episode 17 of the Grand Assault Podcast, where we talked about what did we talk about?
Apologetics.
Yeah, we talked about apologetics. This is Anthony, our lovely guest. This is
Gavin.
Gavin. I'm Brandon. And we'll see you in the next one.
This is the Grain of Salt Podcast, the #1 podcast that you should take
with a grain of
of salt. Peace, guys.
Peace out.